The wrench hit the concrete before I saw my father's face. It rang once, clean, bright, like a dinner bell nobody wanted. The tank coughed, shuddered. Then the turbine took a long breath and came alive. Heat rolled over the fairground. Kids cheered. Dad's mouth opened shut. The commander's voice carried, "Actually, she's the chief engineer." I said nothing. I wiped my fingers on a red rag that smelled like peppermint and grease and looked at Earl Lawson the way you look at a fence you've run into your whole life. A week earlier, Route 33 wore rain, and the Kroger lot looked like a lake. My old F-150 heater wheezed. The cracked dash rattled. Lancaster does March the same way every year. Wet cardboard diesel church bells that refuse to care. Dad's shop sits back from the road. Cinder block the color of chewed gum, hand-painted sign, Lawson Auto and Small Engine EST. 79, inside smells like carb cleaner and burnt coffee. Mom's photo hangs above the pegboard straw hat, tomato, big as a baby's head. Folks say I look like her. Dad never says. The bell chimed when I pushed in. Dad had a carburetor open on the bench, reader's low on his nose. "You learning anything useful over there?" he said. "Not looking up or just more paperwork?" "Mostly how not to guess," I said, setting a Bob Evans bag on the counter. "Apple fritter, if you're not mad at me. Glazed twist if you are." He grunted Ohio for hello and took the fritter. County Fair called. "Want me to set up a table Saturday? They're dragging a tank in. Big show." "It's the Guard," I said. "Community day. City kids. Fixing farm problems," he said, smiling into the dough. "Watch 'em flood the engine and call it a parade." "It's a turbine," I said. "Same story," he said. "Something breaks men who know fix it. Men who don't talk about it." He didn't say women. He didn't have to. I poured coffee and let the rain drum on the roof. I drill with the Army National Guard 2 weekends a month maintenance. Chief warrant, tracks heavy equipment. I know which connectors lie half-seated and how a bad ground turns good men into guessers. Machines don't care who you are. They care about volts, fuel, air timing. Mrs. Pennington called about her Buick's airbag light. "No, ma'am," I said, "we can't install a used airbag from your cousin's shed." Dad smirked and we almost smiled at the same time. Almost. "County board meets Tuesday," he said. "Contracts for plows and school buses. Ought to be our year." "You get the lift inspection done?" I asked. "Paperwork," he said. "They know me." "They know records," I said. A bus hissed by outside. He set down the fritter. "You trying to steal my name, Ray?" "I'm trying to make sure an ambulance doesn't die on a hill because somebody skipped a checklist." He rolled his eyes. "The Lord didn't need a checklist to make a tree." "Maybe that's why one fell on the truck last year," I said. He laughed despite himself, and for a heartbeat, the room felt like when Mom would swat our shoulders with a dish towel and tell us to hush. That afternoon, Lieutenant Colonel Mark Rudd called. His voice is steady. "We're taking the M1 for static," he said. "PR wants it hot by 2. You okay to hang around in case something acts up?" "Something always acts up," I said. "Better in jeans if we're not cutting a ribbon," he added. "Less handshake, more work." That evening, I picked up chicken thighs and good coffee at Kroger, then went home to Mom's oak table. I spread my binder certifications. OSHA printouts a page where I'd written hiring vets and apprentices. Some dreams are like engines that hate being flooded. You feed them air first. Sleep came thin. After midnight, a siren rose and fell, not urgent. In the morning, Dad was already at the shop radio, low coffee on the carb, back together. "Fair's Saturday at 2, I said. "Don't be underfoot," he said. "I'm usually under the machine," I said, and took a donut I hadn't bought. On Friday, I checked my meter, topped off the little bottle of contact cleaner, put fresh batteries in the headlamp. There's luck, and there's being ready for what folks call luck. That night, the rain quit. The sky turned the color of a nickel. I drove past the fairgrounds. They were testing lights. The PA crackled check. I sat in the truck and thought about Dad's hands, cracked certain and mean when they didn't need to be, and how a man can love you the way he was taught to love a problem. Tighten until something gives. Saturday came gray and cool. I wore jeans and boots, and the jacket with stains I can name by year. I braided my hair. No makeup. The work doesn't care if you're pretty. It cares if you show up. At the gate, a volunteer handed me a wristband. Kettle corn met diesel. Church ladies lined up pies. Beyond the rope, the tank sat big as a barn paint. Dull under clouds, crew clustered around a toolbox, pretending not to be nervous. I saw my father Booth set up Lawson auto banner jar of bolts like always. He looked smaller in the open air. Or maybe I'd grown. I walked toward the tank. He spotted me and waved at a young sergeant like a man shooing a fly. "Get her out of here," he said. "She's underfoot." I kept walking. I went to my knees on the gravel and set a hand on the battery cutoff, then the harness, then the cannon plug that never liked this weather. The commander's shadow slid across the hull. Kids hushed. Somewhere a church bell rang. Noon. You know the rest. You heard the wrench. And if you didn't, you will. I didn't become the one who trains the trainers by waking up that way. It came from small cuts and greasy notebooks. The map calls them training areas. We know them by the smell-wet canvas JP8 pine dust. Ohio's Guard spends weekends at Ravenna. At dawn, you hear metal talk before men do. They didn't teach heroics. They taught PMCS. Before you touch anything, run the checks. Same sins every time leaks loose lost. Don't trust memory. Trust the sequence. Sergeant Hollis, scar like a plowed row across his eyebrow, tapped the technical manual. Read the book Lawson. The book doesn't care if you're tired. The book is thicker than a church hymnal and just as little loved until trouble comes. We learn the machine's language, fault codes, continuity grounds. On the M1, the AGT 1500 sounds like a barn-sized shop vac, waking up angry. The first time I heard it spool, I thought of Mom's bread maker, settling into a hum that meant you could stop worrying. Same comfort, different pitch. Guessing makes a mess. I once chased a fuel hiccup half a day, wrote a whole story about a weak pump. Hollis watched me burn daylight. "Meter Lawson," he said. "You're writing fiction." The meter told the truth. A chafed wire under tape near a frame seam. We fixed it, logged it, and next morning I taught that check to 3 kids who thought confidence could replace steps. They teased my green notebook until they started asking for pages. It wasn't a trick. It was curiosity repeated. The Guard didn't make me less of my father's daughter. It made me careful where I put my stubborn. Dad taught me to listen to engines with the hood up and the radio down. The Army taught me to prove what I thought I heard. I live between those truths. I got good by being wrong in public. One annual training, I misrouted a harness and let it rub an edge I hadn't padded. The tank ran an hour, then died like a snuffed candle. Hollis didn't yell. He had me walk the crime scene I'd made. What did we skip? What story did we tell ourselves? I wrote it down, pad edges. Support and secure, check slack through travel. I still feel that lesson in my fingers. Warrant school wasn't pretty. The state crushed us at the RTI, then sent us south for phases that test whether you can think 3 steps while someone asks for 4. They don't care how loud you are. They care if it works when it should, and if you can explain why. I learned to brief a fix. Like a pastor reads a funeral, plain exact, no poetry where a number belongs. Beyond the book, everything electric wants a clean path home. Most failures aren't ignorance. They're hurry. Pride is a dull tool. Patience is sharp. Carry a good meter and a better attitude, and you can walk into almost any problem and find a door. I also learned to keep my mouth shut when my hands could talk. Every motor pool has a barker. If you let him write your part, you'll never touch the machine. I learned to live near the ground strap and where the harness disappears, to smell the sweet of coolant and the sour of battery gas, to feel with fingertips what eyes miss. Dad taught me to hear. The Army taught me to touch without breaking. People think the Guard is weekends and forms. There are forms, but there's also a kid's minivan on the shoulder in January and a guardsman who stops because habit says, check your people. A township plow with a dead alternator when the county's out of patience and salt. A church van limping home after a potluck. The world leaks into the motor pool and back again. When I told those stories at the shop, Dad called them charity. I called them neighbors. Not everyone wanted me there. Some used the soft knife. You don't have to lift that, they'd say, and then wait to see if I'd argue or make them carry heavy forever. I learned to say, hand me the torque wrench, and mean it. The click at 85 foot-pounds sounds the same no matter who holds it. I earned chief because I stopped needing to be right first. I needed to be right last. Let bad ideas die without killing the person who had them. Let's try your theory, then point to the meter and move on. Crews remember that long after they forget which part quit. He and I speak different dialects of the same language. His is get it running. Mine is keep it running. He believes in feel. I believe in feel and proof. He carries a red rag. I carry the rag and the log. When the fair called about the tank, I didn't think about pride. I thought about that squealy PA and the way kids climb steel like a jungle gym. You don't let a thing that big sit dead in public. People remember what they see. They should see it work. So I packed the little bag under my truck seat, meter cleaner, split loom, zip ties, chalk fresh headlamp batteries. None of it heroes. All of it helpers. I set the bag by the door and made a note to catch Dad in a good mood before I brought up lift tags and inspection dates and the part about bids being numbers, not memories. By Saturday, I had the bag, the wristband, and the quiet, you need to hear small things. The fair smelled like sugar and hot oil. I stood outside the rope and watched young shoulders slump at the first cough. I watched my father tilt his head with that thin smile men in shops wear when somebody else's machine won't start. See, I told you. Then I stepped under the rope like it was a motor pool morning, not a stage, not a fight, not a sermon. Just checks a wire where it shouldn't rub, and a breath the turbine needed help remembering how to take. That's what the Army taught me. That's what I carried to the fair, quiet and a meter. Saturday came in under a low sky. The fairgrounds were rutted and damp, volunteers waving trucks toward dry spots. I parked by the horse barns, grabbed my canvas bag, and followed the mix of kettle corn and diesel toward the midway. The guard had a rope line by the grandstand recruiting tent coolers, and the tank behind sawhorses like a stubborn bull. A sign said, "Please do not climb without assistance." Kids climbed anyway until a sergeant said not yet. Big machines make a crowd lean in. Lieutenant Colonel Mark Rudd wore a field jacket and the calm of a man who won't be hurried. He chatted with the VFW commander while the PA squealed and settled. Church ladies laid out pies. Dad's booth sat under our old Lawson Auto banner jar of Bolt's carburetor cutaways, business cards with a shop photo. Red rag in his pocket. The face that says he has plans and none of them need help. Regulars and seed caps talked spark plugs and gossip. He looked pleased in the way attention confirms belief. He saw me and gave a chin raise that might have been hello and might have been don't start. I waved and kept moving. There's peace in skipping a conversation you can recite by heart. At the rope, a young specialist handed me water and kept glancing at the tank like a man watching a sleeping baby he isn't sure he knows how to hold. The crew chief Staff Sergeant Mendez had a panel open and a tablet on the fender. Two privates worked a checklist that looked like a worry list. "Morning," Chief Rudd said. He uses the title like a first name. "Thanks for coming." "Fair beats motor pool paperwork," I said. "Not near S1, he smiled then to the crew. "You've got time. Don't let the crowd set the pace." He peeled off to shake a commissioner's hand. I stood back. Hovering makes young hands shake. Dad drifted closer. They started it, yet he asked loud enough for heads to turn. "Pre-checks," I said. "Translates to no," he said. "Boys ought to call somebody who knows." "Those boys know plenty," I said. A kid in a Thomas sweatshirt tugged his mother's sleeve. "Is it real?" he asked. I told him yes, real as the school bus louder than the mower. His eyes went big. His mother mouthed thanks. Dad rolled his eyes like I'd given away state secrets. By noon, the crowd thickened. Scouts lined up for pictures. The commissioner thanked sponsors and veterans. Meat smoke drifted over and made everything smell like Memorial Day. Mendez called out readings. Fine, then not. The turbine coughed and died. Reset. Same cough, sadder. 3 heads turned toward the crowd, fear checking for witnesses. Rudd kept his hands in his jacket. "Take your time," he told Mendez. PMCS isn't less important because somebody's eating a corn dog. Dad chuckled. Turbine, huh? He said. Bet they flooded it. You can't flood a turbine. I didn't argue. The meter in my bag felt heavier. With each minute, the tank sat dead. Towns write public stories fast. They last longer than private fixes. I thought about the school bus contract, the lift inspection I kept bringing up, and how boards like check marks more than memories. Pork sandwich, Dad asked, which meant let's go laugh from our booth. I'm good, I said. Two teenagers filmed already writing captions in their heads. The crew's hands were fine, just a little fast. Fast hides doubt the way, loud hides fear. I stepped toward the rope, then stopped. I don't offer help before it's asked. People hear judgment. Across the sawhorses, Rudd met my eyes and gave a small nod. I might call your number, sit tight. Dad slid to the rope. Grease lived in the grooves of his knuckles. You bring that notebook, he said. Write, don't break it in front of everybody. I let it pass. A deputy wandered by and nodded. His daughter's Camry and a January morning sat between us like an old favor. Towns are small because favors are. The PA squealed and died. Mendez reset again. The cough came and faded. He closed his eyes like he was praying to a god that speaks in ohms and fuel pressure. Rudd checked his watch and looked at me. He didn't wave me in. He didn't have to. The look said out of guesses. Bring steps. I ducked under the rope. A few people clapped. Someone doing anything always earns a clap at a fair. Dad saw me and his mouth went thin. Don't, he said. Not a shout. Something smaller and sharper. I kept walking. Gravel shifted under my boots. The tank grew larger with every yard. Machines loom when you choose them. I could see the harness bend where it shouldn't, and the cannon plug that sulks on damp days. My fingers already knew how the tape would feel soft, where it should be crisp, the telltale of a chafe. The young specialist cleared his throat. Ma'am, do you? I'm just looking, I said. Helpers make room. Heroes make speeches. I prefer room. I dropped to a knee. The world went quiet the way it does when you decide what matters. Jokes pies, music gone. I heard the tick of cooling metal, the faint whine of a relay trying and failing my own breath steady because steady is part of the job. Behind me, Dad's voice rose, announcing itself to anyone within 10 yards. Get her out of there, he said. She's underfoot. A few heads turned. Some knew me. Most didn't. Crowds aren't sentimental. They want the big thing to roar so their kids can climb it. Rudd stepped closer, but didn't say my name. He was giving me one clean chance to be right without his voice tipping the scale. I set the bag by my knee, unzipped it without hurry, and pulled the headlamp and the meter. There's a light that comes when you choose not to argue. You fix. That's where some folks think the story begins with the sound that came after. But before sound, there's always this breath in hand steady wire, right. Dad's boots scuffed at the rope. Throw her out, he said. I clicked the headlamp on. And the fare shrank to the size of a connector. Sound went cotton soft. I could still hear the PA breathe and kettle corn crack, but far away, like a radio in another room. Up close, dust-cold paint, the faint green smell of new tape that hadn't been pressed hard enough to matter. Ma'am, the specialist started. Hold the light there, I said, and he did. The cannon plug sat where it always sits, sulking just enough in damp weather to make a liar of anyone who swore it was fine yesterday. The harness bent across a frame edge that had been handled by someone with more speed than patience. The tape felt soft under my nail. I peeled an inch. There it was, the shiny kiss where insulation had rubbed thin and a ground had become a suggestion instead of a promise. Throw her out! Dad barked louder now. A few folks near the rope laughed like church kids when a hymn goes flat. Staff Sergeant Mendez hovered, respectful, worried I might offend the ritual. We reseated that, he said. Bet you did, I said. We're going to reseat it for real? I cut the tape back to clean-cleared grit with a shot of contact cleaner and listened to it hiss. The specialist held the meter like it might bite him. I clipped leads, checked continuity where the manual says, and where experience whispers. The numbers told a story that matched the smell. I pressed the plug home until it clicked like a lock finally catching. Then I added a split loom sleeve, a zip tie at each end, and a third one I could hear Hollis in my head insisting on, because travel rubs and travel lies. Who told you to get under there? Dad said to nobody and everybody. She's going to cost you a motor. Sir Mendez said, voice polite in a way only enlisted men master. She's our chief. Dad snorted. Chief of what, a clipboard? I didn't look back. I've learned where my eyes help and where they punish. I chalked a mark so anyone who came later would see what we'd done, and why then leaned over to the battery cutoff and gave it a brisk cycle to clear whatever complaints had stacked up in the system's memory. Ready, I said to Mendez, still on a knee. Let's do it, he answered steady now that he had steps to hold. Behind us, Lieutenant Collish Rudd stepped into the open hands, still in his pockets. He didn't clear his throat or ask for silence. Crowds hush when they smell a moment coming. Get her out of there! Dad tried one more time, like yelling could outrun physics. I nodded at the specialist at the controls. He looked to Mendez, got the sign, and went through the start sequence exact, not fast. Switches. Pause. Watch the gauge. The turbine took a breath, the long, low inhale I know better than my own voice. The whine rose. Somebody in the front row clapped too early, the way some folks say, Amen, before the preacher finishes. The whine steadied, deepening into the kind of faith that doesn't need words. Bang! Not a gunshot, more like a heavy door slammed by wind. The engine caught. Hot air rolled. Diesel and JP8 braided into a smell that means it's okay to relax. The hull trembled, then settled into that satisfied hum machines make when the math finally fits. The little boy in the Thomas sweatshirt threw both hands up like he'd scored a touchdown. His mother laughed the relieved laugh of a woman who didn't want to explain a dead tank to a 6-year-old all afternoon. Teens lifted their phones not to mock, but to keep. Mendez closed his eyes and grinned the grin of a man whose shoulders just dropped an inch. There it is, he said soft. Hold idle and monitor temps, I said. He didn't need me to say it. I said it anyway, because good habits like being seen. Behind the rope, something metal rang bright as a bell. I turned just enough to see Dad staring at his hand, the box wrench on the concrete by his boot like it had jumped. He wasn't mad at the wrench. He was mad at gravity. The VFW commander, who had fought every machine the Guard ever dragged to a parade, since Carter gave me a nod the way old men do when they recognize a species of work. He didn't clap. He didn't need to. Rudd stepped forward, voice carrying without a shout. Folks, he said, appreciate your patience. These things want what they want. When they don't get it, we call the person who can make them honest again. He turned, not to the crowd first, but to my father. Rudd has farm hands and officer eyes. Sir, he said with respect, when this county needs this iron to move, she's the one I call. Dad's jaw worked like he'd bit pepper. He opened his mouth, then shut it. He stared at the wrench like it owed him a better story. The PA popped back to life, and some teenage volunteer voice shaking said, we have a demonstration starting in 5 minutes. Also, pies at the Methodist tent are half price. The crowd laughed as if the sound itself were permission to breathe again. Chief Lawson Rudd said, using the title like it weighed exactly, right, walk the crowd through what you did. I reseated a connector and protected a chafe, I said. Crew had the sequence right. Weather didn't. A kid in an ROTC hoodie asked, is that all? That's always all I said. 1,000 little alls done in order. He grinned like somebody had told him a secret he could use on a Tuesday someday. On the rope, Dad finally found his voice. Showboat, he said, but it came out tired, not sharp. For a second, I saw the man who taught me to listen to an engine with the radio off, not the man who made rooms small to stay big inside them. Mendez checked temps, gave a thumbs up, and cut the engine on my nod. Silence came back in a rush, and the fare sounded louder for having been quiet kids' gulls, a pie tin clatter. I stood knees complaining and brushed grit off my jeans. Thank you, Chief Rudd said. To the crew, reset the rope for supervised photos. Safety brief first. Nobody climbs before we say. 2 of the crew started to move younger by 10 minutes than they'd been an hour ago. The specialist who'd held my light tucked it under his arm like something valuable. "Ma'am," he said, "can I, take a picture of how you loomed that? So we do it the same next time." "Do it better," I said. "Write it on your checklist." He smiled already, pulling a pen from behind his ear. I turned toward the rope. Dad didn't meet my eyes. He picked up the wrench, wiped it with his red rag, and jammed both into his pocket like he could undo the sound we'd all heard by hiding the thing that made it. "Nice work," the deputy said as he passed the man with the Camry winter morning still between us like a handshake you never brag about. He tipped his head toward Dad. "He'll come around." "Engines are easier," I said. Across the way, church ladies boxed up pies, and a school board member scratched notes on a yellow pad. People pretend not to connect dots. They always connect dots. The tank had started. The person who started it had a shop somewhere in town and a father who didn't clap. The story would get told wrong a dozen ways before supper and right a few times by men who don't talk unless you ask them. Rudd leaned close enough I could hear without anybody else hearing. "Board meets Tuesday," he said. "Bring that binder you keep pretending you don't carry." "I don't pretend," I said. "I just don't wave it." "Wave it," he said and smiled. "And bring the meter." He moved off to shake a commissioner's hand. The specialist offered me back my headlamp like a ring he wasn't sure I still wanted. I clipped it to my bag and breathed. The tank ticked as heat settled. Dad's booth beckoned like an argument you could walk into and not out of. Instead, I walked to the Methodist tent, bought 2 slices of cherry pie, and took one to Mrs. Pennington, who'd found a bench and a patch of sun. "Airbag light still on?" I asked. "Blinking," she said. "But I can wait till Monday. Heard you made the big one purr." "It breathed," I said. "Men don't like when something breathes without them," she said and patted the bench. I sat, and sugared air and gasoline braided in a way that felt like home. Across the gravel, Dad watched, face unreadable. He looked small in the big day, and I didn't want him to. That feeling surprised me more than the engine catching. By supper, the fairground moment had done a full lap around Hocking County. Somebody's nephew posted a clip in the Lancaster Community Chit-Chat group, 30 seconds of me on a knee, a close-up of my hand, shoving the cannon plug, home the bang, and then Dad's wrench chiming off the concrete like a bell that called folks to an old truth. By 8 p.m., Mrs. Pennington had texted it to half her church. Facebook does what time used to do slower. I dropped the canvas bag at my place and stood at the sink long enough for the hot water to run honest. Grease softened. I scrubbed with the pumice soap Mom used to buy grit in the orange stuff that felt like forgiveness if you didn't push too hard. Out the window, the streetlights threw a weak orange on the wet pavement, and an F-150 rolled by with a dog riding shotgun, solemn as a judge. Dad didn't call that night. He didn't need to. I could hear him from memory. Stunts don't fix trucks. Cameras don't keep engines running. He wasn't wrong. He just wasn't right about what mattered in public. Sunday morning, I took a booth at Bob Evans, the one near the window, with a view of the parking lot, where locals play musical chairs with rusted pickups. Phyllis poured coffee like she was refueling an airliner, no spills extra napkins. "Saw you on the computer," she said. "Sounded like victory." "Sounded like a fix," I said. "Same thing when the right kid gets home from school," she said, and left me with eggs that tasted like they remembered chickens. 2 men in seed caps asked if the tank was real, if I'd been over. I gave them the usual guard answer. "We go where we're told, we fix what comes, we come home." They nodded like men who've shoveled their own driveways before sunrise, and think that counts, which it does. At church, the VFW commander cornered me by the coffee urn. "Board meets Tuesday," he said. "You show up with that binder that made my eyes go dry last fall and talk like you did to those ROTC kids plain. Folks come to meetings for a show, but they vote for whoever makes their worries smaller." "Worries big," I said. "Keep the numbers bigger than it," he said and clapped my shoulder. Sunday afternoon, I went to the shop. The bay doors were up. Dad sat at the desk, red rag folded like a flag, the wrench beside it like a twin. He didn't look at me right away. "Busy?" I asked. "Phones rang," he said, not all friendly. I waited. "You made me look small," he said finally. The words came out like they'd been rolling around his teeth since noon the day before. I didn't make anything I said. I fixed a connector. He tapped the wrench's open end. Every man's got a hammer he thinks will fit the world. Yesterday you swung yours and the whole county watched. I brought steps, I said, not a hammer. That worse, he said, and then shook his head like he hated the sentence for being true. We sat in the hum of the shop a full minute. A school bus hissed by on the road, empty, now yellow like mustard against the gray. County's letting bids, I said. Plows, ambulances, buses. We're Lawson Auto, he said. We'll get it. Lift inspections expired. OSHA binders 8 years old. Your torque wrenches haven't seen a cert since Mom's garden was alive. They'll read it out loud in the meeting. He flinched a hair at Mom's name. I hadn't meant it as a weapon. Words work how they want. They know me, he said. They know records, I said. You taught me that when you refused to sign a receipt without the right price. He rubbed his face. We'll fix the papers. Tomorrow, I said, and slid a sticky note across the desk. Names of inspectors, the number for the calibration outfit in Chillicothe, the link to the OSHA training refresher. If you want, I'll take the morning and run the calls. He stared at the note like it had written itself. You pretending to help so you can say you offered. I'm offering, I said. He pushed the note back with one finger. My name's on the sign. I'll handle my house. Your sign's older than your fire extinguisher, I said, and regretted it the second it cleared my mouth. Get out, he said, voice small but pointed. I stood. Board meets Tuesday at 6, I said. I'll be there. Of course you will, he said. You found a camera. Back in my truck, I let the radio play a hymn station out of habit. I don't believe the same way Dad does, but I like the shape the songs make in a room. By the second verse, I'd stopped being mad enough to think straight. The old feed store on Mulberry had a for lease sign with a number I'd already saved. Monday morning, Mr. Dutton met me in the gravel lot. He's a man built like a fence post, upright gray soft where grief lives. My brother ran seed out of here till last winter, he said, patting the doorframe like a dog that still visits. I want it to stay useful. I want it inspected, I said. Lifts, power vents, eye wash. I'll do it by the book or not at all. Cash flow, he asked. Dutton doesn't waste questions. Hocking Valley Credit Union, I said. Miss Patel's giving me a letter this afternoon. I've got equipment lined up in Circleville Benpacks that'll pass if we love 'em first. Name, he asked. Route 33, Fleet and Emergency. I said and tasted it. It sat right plain, a little ugly. Real. He nodded. Month to month for 60 days. If you embarrass me, I will cry at council and blame you. I'd rather you clap quiet, I said. At the credit union, Ms. Patel printed the letter and slid it across like a truce. Your debt to income's clean, she said. Veteran-owned paperwork makes this easier. We like easier. I like honesty, I said. Same thing some days, she said, and stapled a second copy I hadn't asked for in case the first disappears. Small towns plan for weather and men's moods. I spent Monday building a binder that wouldn't blush under fluorescent lights. Safety plan, training logs, lift inspection dates penciled with the inspector's cell torque, wrench calibration, receipts, response time chart pulled from Guard SOP, 2-hour on-call, 24-hour turnaround for priority vehicles escalation tree with names, not titles. I added a 1-page sheet plain as toast. What you get if we win. Bullet points anyone could read without squinting. I printed the OSHA refresher schedule and stapled the sign-in sheet to the back like a promise you can touch. By 4, the old feed store had swept floors, 2 rolling toolboxes, a pegboard that smelled like the inside of a hardware store, and a new eye wash bottle zip-tied at shoulder height. I hung a hand-lettered sign, hiring vets and apprentices. I didn't know who would answer. I knew who I wanted to ask first when it was right. On my way to the shop to try again with Dad, I swung into Brown's Printing. They still run a press older than me, and the whole place smells like ink and Friday papers. Can you run 20 copies of this? I asked. Tab dividers if you've got 'em. For the board, Mr. Brown asked. Everybody knows everybody's calendar. For the board, I said. He lined up the pages, admiration gentle, not showy. You did the homework, he said. Machines like homework, I said. At Lawson Auto, the bay doors were half down and the lights were tired. Dad had the Ohio State game on a radio from the Clinton years, turned just loud enough to make conversation step over it. Two younger mechanics, Luis and TJ, were wiping their hands ready to leave. Evening, I said. TJ grinned like a kid who'd seen a magic trick. Chief, he said, then glanced at Dad, then back to his boots. Luis kept his face polite. Good fix yesterday. Good crew, I said. Good startup sequence. Dad didn't look at me. He rearranged sockets in a tray like he was sorting thoughts. You here to poach my boys? He asked. Not today, I said. Today, I want you to win the buses. He snorted. Buses come here because I know them, not because I know binders. Both, I said. I set my sticky note down again beside his tray. Call by 10 a.m. and you can still get the lift inspection before Tuesday. Patel can fax a letter if you need to show the board you've got headroom. He stared at the note like it was a rattlesnake. Ms. Patel knows my business. She knows mine, I said. She doesn't gossip. Everybody gossips, he said. Then give them a good story, I said. The kind that reads like a checklist. For a long moment, nobody talked. The radio called a bad pass, like it had personally taken offense. Finally, Dad sighed. Not dramatic, just tired. You always write it down, he said almost to himself. Your mother used to do that? Lists everywhere. I'd lose my temper. She'd point at a list like it was a traffic sign. She was right a lot, I said. He shrugged one shoulder. Doesn't make it easier to be married to it. I'm not your wife, I said. I'm the kid who learned. He picked up the sticky note and folded it once, then again. I'll make the calls. He said no flourish. You happy. Safer, I said. On my way out, Luis stopped me by the door. If there's ever training, he said I'd come after hours. Bring TJ, I said. We'll start with meters and end with the stuff that keeps you from guessing. He nodded, like a man who'd just been given permission to take himself seriously. At home, I slid the binder into my canvas bag, then added the meter because Rudd had said to bring it and because it's where my confidence lives when my mouth is tired. I set an alarm for Tuesday and stared at the ceiling long enough to count the popcorn dots to 100. The county will do what the county does. But Tuesday at least, they'd have a choice that read like steps instead of a story. I slept like a person who'd done what she could. Outside, the street went quiet, but for a late motorcycle and a fox's quick bark. Machines, men, animals, all of us wanting the same three things on different days: air, fuel, spark. Tuesday at 4, I set my binder on Mom's oak table and put my meter on top. Tab safety plan, lift inspections done, torque wrench certs, OSHA refresher dates, insurance, a one-pager, what you get if we win. Miss Patel emailed a second letter. Dutton texted a photo of the lease. I breathed until my hands steadied, then drove to the county administration building. The lobby smelled like wax and burnt coffee. Folding chairs filled with bus drivers, 2 EMTs, the VFW commander, and a school board lady with a pencil behind her ear. The clerk set out agendas. Dad came in with a manila folder. The red rag bulged his pocket. He nodded at people who nodded back. Call to order, the chairwoman said. Pledge roll call, then fleet maintenance contract. The clerk read the scope: snowplows, school buses, 2 ambulances, 1 council truck held together by prayer. Requirements: current lift inspections, OSHA training within 12 months, on-call commitments, escalation plan references. First Lawson Auto, the chairwoman said. Dad stood. Evening, he said. Earl Lawson. Been fixing Hocking County since '79. We know these roads. Buses stop at my shop for donuts whether I win or not. We'll keep them running. Records, the chairwoman asked. Dad opened the folder. Lift inspection scheduled tomorrow, 10 a.m., he said. OSHA refresher on the 12th. Torque wrenches to Chillicothe the Friday. The clerk read from a sheet. 2 prior OSHA findings corrected. Follow-up pending. No eyewash documentation. Extinguisher service overdue. No written on-call policy. Dad smiled thin. I answer the phone when it rings, he said. A bus driver in the second row shifted like a man remembering a January morning that didn't have an answer. "Thank you, Mr. Lawson," the chairwoman said. "Next Route 33, Fleet and Emergency." I carried the binder and the meter because Rudd told me to and because I listen. At the podium, I set the meter by the mic. "Evening," I said. "Ray Lawson, Army National Guard Maintenance Chief Warrant Officer. We propose on-call 2 hours for Priority 24 for Standard. Escalation tree with names and numbers, not titles. Lift inspections complete as of today." I held up the stamped form. Eyewash installed. Extinguishers serviced. OSHA refresher scheduled for next month. I kept it simple. "What you get if we win," I said, and walked the sheet, a 24-7 number that rings a phone, not a tree. A second lift reserved for county vehicles during snow. Alternator stock for plows that always die before storms. A Saturday hour for bus drivers to bring a worry and leave with a fix. Training nights so apprentices and county mechanics learn meters and guessing dies young. I didn't mention the fare. I didn't say my father's name. Rooms, remember, without help. A hand went up. "Response time from a dead bus on Coon Path at 6 a.m., a driver asked. 30 minutes, I said. Truck out in 10. We triage by kids in the cold. Ambulance alternator at midnight, an EMT asked. Generator test before shift. If it still dies, we bring a charged unit and swap roadside. If it's the belt, we carry 2. The chairwoman wrote like someone who's driven in the dark. A councilman asked about backup techs if I get sick. 2 on call, I said. 1 veteran I trained. 1 apprentice who can hold a light and call me if he sees smoke. We don't bluff when lives ride. The door opened. A man in a suit with a single silver star slipped-in hat under his arm. He waited until the chair recognized him. "Madam Chair," he said. "Brigadier General Cole State, Adjutant General, not here to back a bidder. The Guard belongs to this state. You don't need speeches. You need whoever shows up at 20 below and makes machines honest. Saturday, a tank breathed in front of half this county. I won't tell you who fixed it, you know. My point is simple competence has receipts. Choose the plan with receipts." He sat. No flourish. The VFW commander's mouth twitched like a man swallowing a cheer. Public comment opened. A driver I didn't know stood. "Claire Morton," she said. "Route 12, Sugar Grove. I just want the kids home safe. Give it to the one who fixed the tank." Dad rose again. "We do this already," he said. "Paperwork don't turn a wrench." I kept my hands on the binder so my mouth wouldn't try to win. The chairwoman answered for me. "Paperwork is how the county sleeps when the wrench is done," she said. "It's how we remember what was promised when we're cold and the plow won't start." Questions closed. The chair looked down the dais, met each member's eyes like a mother checking chores. "Ready for a vote?" Heads nodded. Roll call took a minute that felt longer. Names, eyes, a pause where you could hear the soda machine hum. "Award the fleet maintenance contract to Route 33 Fleet and Emergency," the chair said finally. Motion carries. Silence. Then the kind of applause small towns allow themselves, polite, then warmer. The EMTs tapped their pens. The VFW commander gave one firm nod like closing a case. Dad didn't look at me. He folded the red rag once, then again, and slid it into his pocket, like putting away a flag you don't want to crease. He stayed seated. That surprised me more than if he'd stormed out. After people lined up with forms and questions, the chairwoman shook my hand. "Don't make me regret this," she said. "I don't like regret," I said. "It runs hot." General Cole found me by the water fountain. "Bring that meter when you talk to the high school," he said. "Kids believe what they can touch." "I'll bring extra leads," I said. On my way out, I passed Dad in the foyer, staring at the county seal. He spoke without looking. "You won." "The county did," I said. "True can sound corny." He nodded once, like a man marking a measurement he can't argue with. "Keys are on the bench," he said. "Storage unit." Then he walked toward the lot where the lights make everything look shinier than it is. The storage unit was 3 doors down from the bowling alley, the kind of place you rent when grief pushes you out of your own garage. I used Dad's keys and rolled the door up. Dust lifted like breath. Cardboard boxes ran 2 deep. Mom's handwriting lived on the tops, in blue pen manuals, Chrysler Torque Wrench Cald 2013 garden stakes, church bake sale stuff. The smell was paper rubber a little winter. I cut the tape on Torque Wrench and found her old beam wrench wrapped in a dish towel with strawberries on it. Calibration sticker faded but readable. Underneath sat a clipboard with a sun-yellowed sheet. Shop standards checklist. Lines in her neat print. Write it down, use the meter, pad sharp edges. Don't guess with tired hands. Coffee helps, pride doesn't. I stood there and read it twice, then a third time for the steadiness it gave. Dad had said keys on the bench like he was giving up a fight, not a gift. I texted him a picture of the list and typed, hanging this up, then erased the text. Instead, I drove to Mulberry and taped the list to a blank spot on my new pegboard at eye level. It looked right there like a rule we'd all agreed to long before we knew it. By Friday, the BenPack lifts stood like blue telephone poles level bubble dead center. The eye wash bottle hung where a hand could find it blind. Ms. Patel stopped by with donuts and 2 copies of things the county would eventually ask for. "You smell like rubber and paper," she said. "That's how you know it's real." I hired who I'd already been training. Luis came over first cap in hand, then grinning wide when he saw the meter cart. "We doing classes?" he asked. "Monday nights," I said. "You, TJ, and a couple kids from the high school shop. Vets get first crack at the lift when county jobs are done." A week later, I found a resume tucked under the door, Nate Mac McKinnon, SGT Ret. Infantry. But his cover letter talked about a Harley he nursed across 3 states and an ambulance alternator he once swapped in the snow because waiting wasn't an option. I called the number. "Bring your jacket," I said. "We'll see if your hands remember." They did. Mac worked quiet, cleaned as he went, and made the shop feel older in the good way. When the first county ambulance rolled in for a squeal and a check, I slept fine knowing he'd signed the tag. The first test came at 2 a.m. in a freezing rain that started as a rumor and turned to ice. Bus 17 wouldn't wake behind the elementary school. The driver's voice on the hotline sounded like a man with cold in his bones. "Kids in an hour," he said. "We'll beat them there," I said. Mac and I rolled out. The lot lights made a stage of wet asphalt. The alternator whined like a cat. I heard Hollis in my head. Belts, then grounds, then what feeds what? Mac shined the light where I pointed before I pointed. 10 minutes later, the belt was new and the ground was scraped clean and bolted like a promise. The bus coughed and caught. The driver's shoulders dropped. "Bless you," he said, and I waved it off like an apology you don't want, because favors aren't favors when it's your job. Around town, folks stopped using the fair video like a punchline and started asking plain questions. What do I do when my check engine light blinks like a Christmas tree? Why's my plow die only when it's mean out? We printed a 1-page don't panic sheet with 3 boxes. Pull over safe, call, describe the dash. It was simple enough to stick on a fridge. Dad walked into the new shop the second Tuesday after the vote. He looked around without nodding, like a man at a museum with feelings about modern art. He set a small box on the bench. Inside were Mom's label maker, 2 rolls of tape, and 3 empty cards she'd written Torque Wrench Cald on waiting for dates. I took that list down after he didn't finish. Felt like it bossed me. "It helped me," I said. He nodded once. I can believe 2 things at the same time. He tapped the beam wrench, the old one with the strawberries towel. "Keep this where people see it." "I will," I said. He didn't apologize. I didn't push. We walked the floor. He put a palm on the new lift column like it was a good dog. "You greased the screw?" he asked. "Yesterday," I said. "We're starting a log." "Logs," he said, and the word sounded like respect, not paperwork. That night, training looked like a small town doing homework. High school shop kids stood where they could see phones pocketed because Max said so. Luis traced a circuit on a whiteboard, while TJ found a chafe with his fingertips, just like I taught him. I passed around the meter and didn't talk until they did. When they got it, they grinned the quiet grin that keeps a person showing up. Before he left, Dad pulled me aside, thumb on the red rag like a worry stone. "You going to keep the name Lawson? Anywhere?" he asked, eye on a corner of wall near the doorframe. I was thinking a shadow box, I said. Mom's list, your first shop photo, the tool tag, with the year I knocked the carburetor off the bench and you made me clean the parts one by one. He half smiled. You were thorough, he said. Snotty, but thorough. We can hang it by the coffee, I said. People see it on their way in and out. He looked at the door. You don't need me here, he said. Not to make it run, I said. Maybe to make it feel like home. He nodded, then reached in his pocket and set a wrench on the bench the same size and make as the one that rang at the fair. He'd polished it like a Sunday shoe. For the box, he said. We didn't hug. We stood in the light that shops have after 8 p.m., when the air is a mix of work and quiet. He left without a big scene. That was the favor I didn't know to ask for. Spring turned to heat. We made our 2-hour on-call every time, and when we missed by 5 minutes once in July, I called the chairwoman before she called me. We'll buy the driver breakfast, I said. She laughed and said the driver already told her we'd beat Sunrise by a mile on every other call. That's how trust accrues small deposits steady. In August, the high school invited me to talk. I brought the meter like General Cole said, and let kids build a circuit wrong then right and watch the numbers tell the truth without anybody judging. Afterward, a girl with chipped blue nail polish asked if you had to know cars to start. You have to want to learn, I said. We can teach the rest. She signed up for Monday nights. The fair came back around hot this time. The tank sat where it did last year, paint a shade duller. Still a magnet for kids and dads and every veteran who pretends not to mist up around big steel. The crew asked me to say a few words. I said the only ones that felt honest. Machines don't care about your story. They care about the steps. Do them in order. Be kind. That helps too. I taught on the rope line for an hour while Mac handled a generator that hated humidity. When I looked up, Dad was on the bleachers with a styrofoam cup watching. He lifted the cup like a toast. I lifted the beam wrench, the old one, by way of reply. It wasn't clapping. It didn't need to be. We were past loud. Back at the shop that night, I framed Mom's checklist and Dad's polished wrench together. The shadow box went up by the coffee pot, where hands reach first thing. We added a small card under the glass. Respect is the bill you owe when someone shows up and does the work. If this story felt like something you've lived, if you were raised tough, or taught someone tough how to be gentle with the work, share it with them. And if you want more plain stories where the fix is real and the win is public, stick around. Tell a friend. Click subscribe. We'll keep the coffee hot and the meter handy.